California is one of several states that takes longer than others to finish counting ballots, and that's because voters just have to mail their ballots by Election Day. They don't actually have to arrive that day. But that could change depending on a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that's expected in the coming weeks. News 8's Esmeralda Perez joins us now in studio with what's at stake. Esmeralda.
Well, here in our state, the ballots can be mailed on Election Day if they're postmarked by then and received within 7 days. But if you wait until the last minute to mail it in, that could matter. A case before the U.S. Supreme Court could change that rule, and this ruling could come as soon as Thursday.
What this case is about saying, no. If a ballot is not received by the registrar of voters by Election Day, you cannot count it. It's invalid.
That's legal analyst Dan Eaton, who says this case is all about what the term Election Day really means, whether it's considered when a mail voter makes their selection and puts it in the mail, or only on the date set by Congress for federal elections, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. This could affect congressional races and general elections.
When you're talking about general elections where there are federal candidates, meaning candidates for U.S. House of Representatives or U.S. Senate, the Supreme Court, based on the oral argument, seems likely to rule that ballots that are mailed by Election Day but are received after Election Day, as California law currently allows, cannot be counted.
He says in California in 2024, about 2.5% of ballots, which is roughly 400,000, were mailed by Election Day, but were not received until after Election Day.
Those ballots, if the Supreme Court rules as expected, invalidating ballots in federal elections that arrive after Election Day, wouldn't count at all. The bottom line is that both parties are going to have to do a lot of work in making sure that their voters who vote by mail get those ballots in well before.
And one point that Dan mentioned is that it's important to note that for people serving in the military, if the Supreme Court rules as expected, they would have to get their ballots in early, Steve.
This is a big change, and news of changes like this don't get out quickly. So if the Supreme Court does rule to make this change, how quickly would it go into effect?
So we will know what the ruling is by July 4th. That's one thing that we know for sure. So if the Supreme Court rules that Election Day is the deadline to have received the mail-in ballots, it would have an effect on the November 4th election, at least in respect to the federal offices. Something that Dan mentioned is that candidates are going to have to do a lot of work, as they will have to let voters who vote by mail get those ballots in way before Election Day. We'll, of course, continue to follow this through and bring you any updates, Steve.
That is always the big issue for candidates, is getting their voters to the polls. Now they're going to have to not only do that, but also make sure they put their ballots in early and really probably at least 4 or 5 days early, because you don't know how long that mail is going to take.
A big responsibility, spreading awareness, right?
Yep. All right. Well, continue to follow it, as you mentioned, Esmeralda. Thank you.